On this episode of Take Back the Advantage, we talk about MITRE's new Shield project with two of its creators, Christina Fowler and Bill Hill. All right, so good morning, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is when you happen to be watching this. Welcome to our latest episode of Take Back the Advantage. This episode is going to be a little bit different. It's really awesome what we're going to end up doing. We're going to be having an interview with a new product that's put out there by the folks at MITRE. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to have two of the folks who helped develop this new product. Christina Fowler, she's a chief cyber intel strategist within MITRE's InfoSec. She leads the cyber threat analysis cell. She's got 20 years of experience in cyber investigations. She's previously a member of the board of directors for the National Defense ISAC. And she's a recognized expert in cyber deception, computer forensics, computer crime investigations, cyber espionage, and network security. And with her, I also have Bill Hill. So Bill is the Chief Information Security Officer for MITRE Corporation. He's also a founding member of the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures List. So if you've ever seen the CVE numbers and all that kind of stuff, he was one of the founding members of bringing that together. He holds a patent for a method and apparatus for transferring and reconstructing an image of computer readable medium, which sounds really awesome. He's got a bachelor's in business management from Florida State University and a master's in computer science and software engineering from George Mason University. So Christina and Bill, welcome to Take Back the Advantage. Thank you for joining us. Anything you guys want to add in terms of who you are, your background, any of that kind of stuff?
No, that's great. Thanks. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Very glad to join you.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here. And so for those who are tuned into this, the topic of this conversation is, what was it, about a week and a half ago, somewhere in that ballpark, that MITRE came out with what they call Shield. Now, if you're in the information security industry, you are probably familiar with MITRE's attack matrix, which is sort of a classification of the things, the techniques and the tactics and all that the bad guys use when they go ahead and compromise our environments. And it's used for a lot of purposes, including just trying to identify those tactics and techniques that are used by the attackers so that we can do a better job of defending our networks. Well, recently, MITRE came up with what they call Shield. And I'll let them talk about what it is in their own terms, but ultimately it is a structure of information that looks more at defensive capabilities and specifically at what's often referred to as active defense. So some of that is cyber deception, but there are other aspects in there as well. So what it does is it looks at all of the various tactics and techniques within MITRE's attack and provides a defensive or an active defense response to those. And what's really cool about it is there are lots of different options in many cases, depending upon your goals and utilities. It's a fantastic tool. And so I wanted to get these guys on here because they were involved in creating it. So I'll throw out there, and we'll kind of, whoever wants to answer, we'll start off with kind of what was your thought process? What prompted you to, well, let me back up. Any other description you want to add about Shield? How would you guys describe it?
I think you did a pretty good job, and we're thrilled that in a short time, people like you have sort of been able to take a look at it and really sort of take it on board like you did, because I think you gave it a really great description. I don't think I would add anything.
Awesome. Christina, anything?
No, I think that's a good description. I mean, the goal for us is to give defenders an option other than just sitting back and letting the attacker do whatever they want to do. We want them to be active and have some options at their disposal that they can pull from, and also help contribute new things to us to give us new ideas of what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's really awesome. As I look at security, one of the things that I'm starting to wrap my head around is the fact that I look at security as a three-legged stool, right? Everybody has to have a three-legged stool analogy. So mine looks at security as there's an aspect of it that is related to the cyber piece. That's the bits and bytes security stuff that most of us play around in a day-to-day basis. Now, there's also a separate but definitely related aspect of physical security. So, you know, if you do a really good job of the cyber, but you do a bad job of physical, you definitely have some exposures, and vice versa. But then if you look at it from an attacker's perspective, attackers can attack our cyber infrastructure. They can attack our the physical, and they can conduct a physical attack. But the other thing they can do, as evidenced by things like social engineering and phishing and spear phishing, is they can attack the mind of the person sitting at a keyboard. And defensively, that, in my mind, is the third leg of the stool, going after the mental aspect of an attack. And that's something that we just haven't done well throughout the ages. And I think that's where a lot of cyber deception comes into play. And to me, that ends up being the thing that finishes our security paradigm. We've had physical, we've had cyber. What we haven't had is that ability to take a look at the mental aspect of things. And so this active defense, where we're actually, in effect, pitting human beings against other human beings, as opposed to pitting technology against human beings, I think is that's the missing piece. And that, in my opinion, is why bad guys end up compromising our networks all the time and stay on there for so long, is because we pit this static technology. Is that sort of some of the vision that you guys see with this active defense strategy?
Yeah, I think so. You couldn't be more right. I sort of see that in sort of two big ways. You're right about the person behind the keyboard, and that's both the user and the cyber defender, right? And so for a long time, we've been working really hard with our users, trying to educate them and bring them on board. You know, it's fashionable to talk about like the users as the weak link or the users are the problem. So over time, we've worked really hard with our users to make them part of the defensive team. And in fact, we consider users one of our best sensors. So we call it the human sensor, because they're the last line of defense in a way. And we know, since we're not perfect, some things will reach them. So at MITRE, we've had a really strong education program. We've had a program where, with no retribution or anything, if you have any doubt about either something you might do, like you've got this email, you don't know what to do with it, you can send it in advance. Or if you clicked on it, but now you're not sure about whether that was a good idea, just send it to us, tell us what you did. We never give anybody a hard time about that. We say, look, as soon as you get nervous, send it to us, we'll help. So those human sensors have actually reached the point where, you know, we keep track of which sensor is doing what for us. And so there have been times where our human sensors catch 10% of what we're catching. So that's huge, right? If I could go as a CISO, if I could go out and buy a product that would do 10% of the sensing, I'd be really happy with that. And so we've turned sort of users around from a problem to an opportunity. Every time they're doing something, it's an opportunity to get it right. So that's one half of it, which is, yes, totally about users. The other side is the cyber defender, right? And you're right, there is an adversarial game going on. Like, you know, the defending your company is not a technology problem alone. You're in a fight, right? And you have an adversary, and they are creative and adaptive. So if you take a sort of, well, I'll put this block and I'll put that block, you know, if that's all you're doing, those are important. Patching's important. Like, we're not here to say that all the fundamentals are not important. Of course they are, but they're not enough, because your adversary is adapting. And so the mindset, one of the reasons we are happy to be talking about Shield and active defense is it's the mindset we want to talk about, right? Which is, you're in a fight, what are you going to do? And just finding ways to duck, well, that's one way. Maybe there's something more. And so that's what Shield is about, is what is that something more that you can do?
Awesome. And so, and I'll direct this at Christina. So there's some amazing information and amazing concepts and really cool ideas in Shield. And just that fact makes it, at least to me, really valuable. But what are some of the use cases that you envision in terms of how cyber defenders would put Shield into use? What do you envision maybe some of the activities that they would conduct using Shield might be?
That's a good question. So we wanted Shield to be easy to, kind of a low barrier of entry, right? So if you're a company who just is kind of dipping your toe into this arena, we wanted it to be easy. So Shield is really a set of building blocks. The Shield techniques are blocks. You can choose to use a block by itself. So like a decoy account, you can create a decoy account, have it to where no user is ever going to log into that. But suddenly, if you see an attempt to log into that account, it's a bad thing because it's all decoy. And so that's a really low barrier of entry to use Shield as a single block concept. If you're a company that's more advanced or you are really all in for adversary engagement, you can start layering these concepts together. So you can take all the different techniques from Shield, link them together. You can take a decoy account, link it to a decoy user, build out a decoy system, a decoy network, detonate some malware in it, and now you have an adversary engagement environment, and you can do a lot more. So really, we try to design it to be very modular and to where anybody and everybody can implement some of the concepts within Shield.
So effectively, you've created a trademark name, right? You've created the Lego blocks.
Exactly. So I actually have my Lego blocks of Shield. And so you can take these individual blocks, you can use them by themselves, or you can put them together and build whatever you want to build, however you see it working.
Yes. Yeah, very, very nice. Now, so I love what you guys have done with Shield, but I got a question about maybe some of the vision going forward. So if you look at, I'm gonna now talk about attack. Now, one of the things that I like about attack, so one of the first efforts to create something like attack was Lockheed Martin's, what they initially called like their intrusion kill chain, or it's often referred to as their cyber kill chain. And it was a cool idea, but there was a lot of criticism because it's got, you know, the first couple of phases in it are reconnaissance and weaponization. And those things occur outside of the purview of the majority of defenders. And so the criticism was, why are we even looking at this? We as defenders can't do anything about that. Now, as we start getting into an active defense and a cyber deception conversation, we actually start to be able to influence the attackers at those early stages. Now, the way that attack addresses that is there's the attack enterprise matrix, which is what most people just call the attack matrix. But then you also have the pre-attack matrix, where the adversaries are kind of formulating their plans, identifying their goals. Then they start moving on into identifying information about the target environment, sort of a reconnaissance phase where they look at identifying technological information, they look at organizational information, they start identifying the vulnerabilities, and then they start staging, planning, and getting ready to execute their attack. So to me, it seems like there is an opportunity to potentially stop attacks, lowercase attacks, before they're even started, by implementing some of the sort of deceptive and active defense ideas and applying them to the pre-attack matrix. Are there thoughts of expanding Shield to have a, I don't know, a pre-Shield, or being able to allow people some options for thwarting the attackers before they're even sending hostile packets to the environment?
Yeah, so I'll start off with that one. So yes, absolutely. So there's definitely things within attack or pre-attack that fit nicely with Shield. So things like setting up decoy personas ahead of time, having an adversary be able to find those when they do some of the reconnaissance, having decoy processes available, exposed to the external internet. So when they're doing their scanning, they're seeing those particular assets. There's definitely pieces where we can expand. We didn't start there. We really wanted to just kind of get something out for Shield and then build upon it as we move forward. But I definitely think there's some coverage that you'll see coming where it really makes sense, like the stages where an adversary is going to do all those reconnaissance. I think we can definitely influence what they're doing and what they're seeing, and hopefully draw them to elements that we've laid out for active defense.
Yeah, I think to me, the thing with the pre-attack is there are a bunch of tactics in the pre-attack that there just really isn't anything we can do about. But you've got the technical information gathering, the people information gathering, the organizational information gathering, and then the technical vulnerability identification, the people vulnerability identification, and the organizational. I think that those sort of 6 steps in there play really, really well into a deceptive sort of arena.
Absolutely, totally agree.
Bill, anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I agree with Christina. I would say, especially as somebody does work that's more enduring in this space, right? If you have a team that is in this game for a while, you're right. Even though you can't, some of these pre-attack things are sort of beyond the purview. You don't necessarily see somebody weaponizing, but sometimes they deliver the weapon. And thinking about, when if you're in a position to take that apart, take apart a piece of malware and look at it, you might start studying it and say, well, wait a minute, what must be true? If this thing is the way it is, what does that say about their weaponizing process? And is there anything we can then, assume to our advantage about that? So if they always do something the same way, maybe we can watch for that, or things like that. So it's true. It's hard to look at those early stages and observe them, but it's definitely worth thinking about what's happening.
Yeah, to me, I think that, like, if you look at some of the, for example, one of the things in pre-attack has to do with open source intelligence collection. So if I can pre-populate fake information that's available via open source intelligence gathering, I can actually cause my adversary to identify systems that aren't there, identify vulnerabilities that aren't there, to weaponize against vulnerabilities that aren't there, actually try to move into the attack enterprise functions. Everything that they do fails. And now they start questioning everything they know about the target environment. And that might even be more than a lot of attackers even want to get involved in. Like, I can't trust the information that I've learned about the target environment. I'm just going to go someplace else. Right. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. So just that ability to mess with the attackers and increase effectively the amount of work effort that they have to do to try to compromise anything is a win across the board.
Right, absolutely. And I think you were talking about this with Stan earlier, right? Which is, our focus is really on what could one team do? That's what Shield is talking about. What can one team do? But there's a part of the conversation we would love to have is what happens if a bunch of teams are doing this, right? If if everybody in the banking industry or in the tractor industry, decided we're going to do this and we'll be known for it. Well, let's admit that we're doing some forms of deception, or we're doing active defense. Right away, you say, well, that's going to have some effect on your adversaries. They're going to think about it, and maybe it'll discourage them. Maybe they'll work harder. You don't know, but I think it's worth, as a community, coming together and say, is this worth talking about collectively?
Yeah, that actually brings up a really interesting point, because it's a weird paradigm. When I talk to people about cyber deception, pretty much the default answer or the default response that I get is, wow, this sounds awesome. Part of it is, it sounds too good to be true. But the other part that I get is, if this is so awesome, why isn't everybody doing it? And that leads to a conversation of, well, a lot of people are doing it. They just don't talk about it because they don't want their adversaries to know that they're being deceptive. And I get that. I understand where they're coming from. But to the point you made, Bill, if my adversaries know that I am implementing a cyber deception or an active defense strategy, that knowledge alone could very well serve a deterrent effect to being attacked, which I think is also something that is a possible benefit of a lot of this.
Or I can just lie and say I'm doing it.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of how many times do people put this house is protected by a home alarm system?
Right.
If I present a harder target than my next door neighbor, then I don't get attacked. And I mean, let's face it, that's like deception of deception, right?
Right.
I'm not gonna lie that I'm doing it. It's pretty awesome stuff. So let me ask you from a usability perspective. I'll tell you the one feature that I personally would love, and I was wondering if this is kind of in the works or whatever, is integrating Shield directly into the attack navigator. So being able to go in, all right, I want to go check myself against, I don't know, APT3, click, click, click. And then out of that, you not only get the TTPs associated with attack and the defensive mechanisms that are built into attack, but also get the options for the different goals and benefits within Shield. Is that something that you guys envision in the future?
So I'll start off with that one. So I definitely see that as something that we're hoping that others might do. So we include the JSON for Shield on the website, and we've already had people who are working that and connecting attack and Shield together. It's not currently on our exact roadmap, but I think it's an easy thing to implement and something that people would find value on. So.
Yeah, just for me, it's just one of those, as I've been playing around with Shield, it's all right, let's go to Attack Navigator, let's map something out. And then there's a little bit of a kind of manual, all right, let me go figure what's going there. But yeah, definitely. So if anybody's out there that, wants to do this, let me know and I'll be happy to. So really, really cool stuff. So in addition to potentially adding some of the components of Shield into for the pre-attack matrix and some of those types of things, what are you guys envisioning Shield becoming, or how do you see Shield developing over time?
Let's see, who's going to run with that? There's different layers of it. So one of the things we're pretty explicit about, in the website and things that we're writing is that we're really hoping to start sort of a community conversation. So I would say first and foremost, we're interested in where people want to go. And so we're looking for ideas about, like you gave us one. So I think that there's, we're looking for conversation and for people to say, see where the interest goes. And I think also we recognize that even in the work we did, as we were doing it, we were thinking, oh boy, there's a better way. We're always looking for the better way. So I think you could look for, a couple of structural changes. We've had this idea that there's Christina's building block idea, where you can just do one thing and it's useful. That's very true. But depending on how complicated your goals are or how sophisticated your adversary, you're going to really need more than one building block in a lot of cases, right? Mm-hmm. And so our early version of Shield focused on the ones. The next version would focus more on multiples. And so, we'll have this idea of plays coming out, right? Which is to say, well, if I'm trying to accomplish something, if I want that first down, several things happen to make that first down happen. A couple guys run one way, a couple guys run another, maybe you throw. And so that's what we're, kind of excited about next, is to say, all right, how do you string some of these together in sort of a coherent set designed to accomplish one goal?
Yeah, absolutely. Christina, any?
I think Bill hit the nail on the head there. The goal for us is to just keep adding more content. We're already getting community contributions for new things that we really hadn't thought about. We recognize that we have one small view of the world. So we do adversary engagement and we do it a certain way, but other people bring different perspectives and different talents to the whole conversation. So we're hoping that, number one, add community content. Number two, add these more complex plays. With that will come sensitivity levels to make sure that if the adversary is doing something and it's not something we want the adversary to know about, we may not publish it out completely. But we really do want to just make sure that we're building a product that people will use. So as Bill said, having people tell us where they want us to go, like the Attack Navigator piece, that is really appreciated. So I definitely ask that if people have comments on that direction, just content, anything, please send that to us.
So as I look at Shield, I see sort of a couple of use cases for it. And I'll say One use case is in the sort of planning and design of your deception and active defense operations, right? I can go in and say, well, all right, cool. If I envision this type of an attack, these are the Lego pieces that I can put together. And even going to the point of, as you talked about these plays, where you're saying, all right, the goal of an active defense or a cyber deception operation is to influence the behavior of the attacker. I want the attacker to do A, B, and C. So being able to chain together a series of things. All right, well, we're going to put credentials in memory. We're going to put we're going to create a real user account in our Active Directory domain. We're going to put credentials directly in memory with a relatively easy to crack bad password. We're then going to use fine-grained password policies to have account lockout occur for those after one bad login attempt. So now when the bad guy gets on and maybe I use a different fake account on different systems in my environment. So now bad guy gets on the box, they dump the credentials out of the LSAS process in memory. They find a credential that they can crack more easily than the other ones because we've put it there. They try to use it, instantly fine-grained password policies get deployed, account lockout happens, detection happens, and you know what box the bad guy's on. So being able to chain together all that stuff is fantastic. The other way that I can see Shield being used is we have a deception environment. Let's now simulate attacks using ATT&CK and find out if there are any gaps or other things that we can go and incorporate into there. One of the things that I'm doing in the class that I'm writing for SANS is I start off with some fundamentals in terms of, all right, if you want to do deception well, one of the things you need to do is know your own environment. Know what we have, right? Know what systems, what operating systems, what data sets, what users, groups, even what vulnerabilities we have. Because if I want to create deceptive systems, then ideally those systems should be at least somewhat similar to the other ones that are in the environment, either that or very different to create an interesting target for an attacker. So part of what I'm doing is going through and helping the students when they take the class to build up that asset inventory. And we're building a little tool to collect all that information. But one of the things that I think is really cool is part of the process that I'm envisioning is, all right, we go through our asset inventory, which now identifies the operating systems and the services and all that, and use that information to generate keywords to do searches within ATT&CK. And then as we get those searches, we pull out all of the tactics and techniques within ATT&CK, map them to Shield, and then use that as the design plan for my deception strategy. So that kind of interaction is kind of some of the things that I can sort of envision being able to go do that. Any thoughts on that? Or?
No, I think those make perfect sense. So I'll tell you another use case that we do more often than not with the concepts of Shield is to test an adversary. So I've gotten some feedback of tell me a little bit more about test. And test is really validating what you think you know about an adversary. So you think a specific adversary has the capability to do lateral movement a certain way. You can actually set up an experiment and say, do they really do it that way, or do they use another tool? You can block them from doing it and see if they have a second technique up their sleeve that you haven't seen before. Maybe it's not even an attack yet. It's something brand new. So we really do like the test tactic in Shield because we find that is really interesting from an experimental standpoint.
I agree, and just to be clear, for those of you who haven't looked at Shield, Shield, similar to ATT&CK, is broken up into basically these tactics and then techniques. So one of the tactics is test, and the test tactic, as Christina was saying, is I want to learn something about the capabilities of my attacker. What are they actually doing? And there's a couple of them that I thought are really cool. Collect, I think, falls in similar to that, which is trying to learn something about my adversary's capabilities and goals and objectives and those types of things. Test is more kind of technical evaluation. Let's find out exactly what these attackers are going to do. The other one that I think is really interesting and kind of counterintuitive if you don't understand this deception space is legitimize. Everybody's like, legitimize is basically allow the attack, facilitate the attacker actually doing, making it so that their tactics and techniques work. We're trying to make it, in some respects, easy for the attacker to do what they want to do. And everybody's like, what the heck? Why would we do that? And it goes kind of hand in hand with some of those test and collect. We're trying to manipulate attacker behavior. If our goal is absolutely nothing but detecting bad guys on the network, low interaction, simple things, create effectively honey pots, honey tokens, whatever. If somebody touches them, it raises an alert and you're done. But you're missing out on all of the threat intelligence and attribution information you can get. And that's really this magic cycle, because I use knowledge of the attackers to make my deception better. And then the deception allows me with things like legitimize, because I want to reinforce the attacker. I want the attacker thinking that they are winning. And because I don't want them, as long as they think they're winning, I can manipulate their behavior in all kinds of different ways. So I want them to think they're winning, and then I want to collect information about how they behave. And that allows me to create better deception, which allows me to collect more threat intel, which allows me to create better deception. And the cycle just keeps spinning. So a lot of times it's, traditional network security often has this swat the mosquito. Bad guys on my network, I'm going to smack them off my network. But in doing so, I've now burned any incident-specific threat intelligence that was available to me. Because all the attacker now has to do is change IP addresses and change their tactics a little bit, come in using a different strategy, and I'm now starting over again. And it's those things where you talked about that test piece, which is so awesome. And that's when you start getting the true active out of active defense. Active defense isn't having a bunch of technologies that automatically respond to what the bad guys do. It's having a human being on the defensive side of a keyboard engaging a human being on the offensive side of the keyboard. And when you pit a human against a human, now we get our advantage back. Because let's face it, defenders have all the budget, they have all the resources, they have more people, they have every advantage. The reason why, in my opinion, why we've done such a bad job of defensive security boils down to a quote that I use all the time. It's by an author, a guy by the name of Barton Whaley. And he's an author on primarily military deception. And in his book, Practice to Deceive, he said, in combat, deception strengthens the weaker side. When all other factors are equal, the more deceptive player or team will always win. The bad guys have been using deception against us forever. We just haven't been using it against them. And they get on our networks. They win all the time. So that ability to actively engage attackers, I think, is really awesome. And I really like that test. I love the legitimize thing just because it's so cool and sneaky and deceptive in and of itself, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's really, really awesome. Any thoughts of my ramblings?
No, other than to say amen. So a lot of what you said is right. We thought carefully about the words we're using, and so active defense was a careful choice for us. It's there, a number of people in the community throw around the word deception, and we see it as part of an active defense, but not the whole thing. And so we're trying to be careful. You asked it a little earlier, where are we going with Shield? So obviously we want to throw more content in the database and have more things that can be done. But also we're starting to try to write down our thoughts, a lot of which I think you just said. So prepare for some plagiarization. But absolutely, this idea of active defense contains a lot of things, and it's not just the deception piece. It is the collection. It is the intelligence. It's the sense making out of what are we seeing the adversary do? What does that say about what they want? How can we use that? So I think you're right about that. You're sort of right about the idea of engagement, in that now it's a two-way street. The adversary was already engaged, and now we have the choice of whether we want to be engaged or not. And I think a lot of defenders might find themselves reinvigorated by the idea that they don't just have to patch and don't just have to eradicate, but let's wake up and say we are in a fight, and you can do some things that return the advantage to you.
I love that. And one of the things that I see in teaching for SANS is some of the more popular SANS classes are the classes on penetration testing and forensics and digital forensics incident response, because those are cool. Those are sexy topics, right? Not a lot of people look at defense as being cool because it's perceived as basically babysitting technology and slogging through logs. And that's not exciting for most people. And this concept of we're in a fight, one of the things that I've talked about and actually kind of folded into the class is this aspect of active defense, deceptive and otherwise, means that our defenders now need to be like defensive cyber ninjas, right? We're not talking about just monitoring logs and patching and babysitting technology. We're talking about actively engaging attackers. We're talking about turning defenders into people that are utilizing skills and capabilities in real time to engage with adversaries that are using skills and capabilities in real time as well. And I think that there's maybe a subtle benefit of doing that because we're making defense cool, and we're making defense sexy. And I think that is awesome because the number of people that I see taking classes on forensics and taking classes on penetration testing, I mean, it's huge. And I get it. Those are fun. Those are interesting. But let's face it, penetration testing, unless you act on the results, doesn't really provide any value. And forensics is basically happening after we've already lost. So why don't we actively engage and turn our defenders into cool, awesome cyber ninjas, cyber martial artists or whatever? And I think that changes the paradigm of computer security in a really fundamental way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if you took Mike Goffin or Andrew Sovern from my team and said they were cyber ninjas, they'd be like, yes, we are. Because that's our goal is, each and every day as we're studying adversaries and we're doing this research, we are finding new, cool, innovative tricks that they are doing, but also coming up with new creative tricks of our own. And that just makes it coming to work worthwhile. It makes it so much more fun when you are being creative and you're trying to be on the bleeding edge of what can I do in this chess match, right? It really is a chess match with the adversary of, okay, they're going to do this. I'm going to counter here, and can I fool them, or can I do something they're not going to expect and come out of left field? It really does make life fun.
Oh yeah, I mean it changes that game so fundamentally that I mean I've said it before. I honestly believe that when we get to the point where we are using deception well, where to the fullest extent that it can be used, where we're expanding other capabilities of active defense, where we're actively engaging the attackers in real time, we end up with kind of two benefits. One is, quite honestly, we can stop attacks before they occur. And two, even those determined attackers, I actually believe that if we do this stuff the way that it could be done, it would be easier to physically compromise an environment than to attack them over the wire and not get caught. It makes it so phenomenally difficult to do things. And that to me is the game-changing part of all of this. It's one of those things that everybody that I've talked to that gets this is incredibly passionate about it. And a lot of people just don't get it. And going back to a comment that I think that Bill made, I think that the problem that we run into sometimes, and also going off what you said, Christina, is this creative aspect. IT people tend to be more comfortable in a world of binary, in a world of ones and zeros. Deception and active defense is an analog engagement, right? This is not binary. It's not flip this switch. It's be creative and think about defense in a different way. The technology, I mean, let's face it, the technologies we use for active defense and deception, this isn't rocket science. This is technologies that the cores have been around for decades. The fundamental concepts that we're talking about have been around for thousands of years. It's just, it takes a different thought process. It takes people thinking about deception in a different way. And to me, that's the biggest obstacle to overcome, is to get people to think differently about how to do deception. And that's where I think Shield comes in, where it can trigger those thoughts. It gives a whole bunch of ideas, and people can look at it and go, oh, that's an interesting idea, but what if I did this?
Right.
Ooh.
You're so right. I'll tell you. So we've been doing this for a while, and in small communities, we've been talking to people about sort of the value that we're seeing and some of what we're doing. But like typical gearheads, to some extent, we were sort of talking about, talking about the techniques, or, talking about the details of, the IOCs we're getting, or anything like that. One thing that we're finding is getting a lot of, uptake in the release of Shield that we did was sort of a new, we tried something different. We weren't getting where we wanted to go because people just weren't, it wasn't exciting them. So we introduced this idea of opportunity, right? We, start saying, okay, we've become the, used car salesman of cyber, right? It's like, there's an opportunity every time your adversary does something, or there may be. But just changing your mindset to say, well, wait a minute, they want to do this. Is there an opportunity here for me? Boom, that has just started the conversation going, where you don't have to know about all these techniques. And in fact, some of the people that we want to reach, maybe the CISOs of the world, or whoever they report to, if you're going to get anywhere with this, your organization is going to have to be behind you. How do you get them on board? And the way you get them on board is at the highest level. You start talking about the game, the move, counter move with English language. We just talk about it as, here's an opportunity. You can learn something. You can capture their tool. There's a bunch of things that you don't have to be real knee deep in technology to say, yeah, I would like that.
It's kind of funny, because when I talk about this to non-technical people, they not only get it instantly, but they kind of respond with, why isn't this being done already? This is not groundbreaking thought process. But when you talk to technical people, it's like you hit a wall, and they're like, because, and it's kind of funny. I tend to think, when I talk to security people, I make this joke that IT people have a mental disorder. And it's a self-imposed mental disorder, because if you talk to an IT person, the way that I always describe it is, if you have a network that is up 95% of the time, you are unemployed as a network engineer. If you have 5% downtime, you are the worst network engineer ever. So what technical people tend to do is they look for the 5-9 solution, right? They look for the solution that's going to solve 99.999% of their problems. And so when you introduce a concept to most technical people, in their head, the first thing they try to do is to break it. Why won't this work? And they throw up all the objections of, why won't this work? And that, particularly when it comes to things like deception and active defense, is a catastrophic mindset, because this isn't about every detailed point working to 99.999% effectiveness. This is about creating a mindset where we make life more difficult for the attackers. Last week, I was talking with Robert Black, who's one of the guys with the UK's National Cyber Deception Laboratory. And one of the points that he made was, our networks are ours. We made them, and we control every aspect about those networks, down to the individual packets. So when the bad guys get on our networks, why not drop them into the matrix, right? Because we can. We control everything. We just haven't been using that control. And I think that, taking the bad guy attacker and putting them into the real life version of the matrix is what we can do with this. We can now spin them around in circles and make them do whatever we want, as long as, and here's the key piece, as long as we have high fidelity, low noise detection and the ability to capture actionable real-time threat intelligence. And oh my gosh, those happen to be some of the biggest benefits of deception and active defense. So it's this missing piece. This is, again, going back to that, this is the third leg of the stool. If we do this, the game is changed forever. All right, cool. So I just want to throw out there, we've been kind of going for about 45 minutes or so. You mentioned a few times, and I know there are links on the site and all that. How would you, to the extent that folks have ideas, they have either techniques that they're or ideas of what you could do with this. What's the best way to communicate?
So that's a good question. So we actually just updated the contribute page on the website this morning to give some frameworks of how to provide, like if you want to provide a new tactic or new technique, how to do that, what should be included, how to frame that out. If you have just feedback on direction, or if you find a misspelling or something like that, we also tell you how to point that out to us as well. So the website is shield.mitre.org. You can also email us at shield@mitre.org and get right to the Shield team, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, awesome. I was poking around. I hadn't looked at the site in a couple of days because I've been knees deep in a few other things and jumped on there. I also saw the document that you put together, the getting started with MITRE Shield, which I thought was really awesome as well. So for those of you that are like, this sounds cool, go to the website, right? shield.mitre.org. Look at it, take a look at the getting started document so you can kind of get a feel for what's going on and start playing. And by the way, if you are playing around with Shield and you haven't looked at ATT&CK and the ATT&CK Navigator and all that kind of stuff, definitely go check those things out as well, because those, they play hand in hand. They're so amazing. Anything that you guys want to add before we wrap things up?
Not me. I think this has been great. I love the, I think you understand what we're trying to do. It's another voice out there. So, thank you for your work, because I think people are going to be excited to hear this message, and we need to get it out there.
Absolutely.
Right, and I'll just add on, our whole goal in this project was to start a conversation. So we appreciate you having a conversation with us about it. And we hope others will give us feedback, help us out, and show us where to take this project next.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you. I mean, thank you for making Shield, because it made my courseware development a whole lot easier, because I'm definitely going to be referencing many of the things in there and kind of pointing people to it. Like I said, it's awesome. I love it. I think it's a fantastic ability to introduce people to very real techniques where they can start improving their security and all that. So thank you guys so much for taking the time and having this discussion with me. I've really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed Shield. So thank you guys for making it as well.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. And for those of you who are watching, definitely go ahead and definitely go take a look at Shield, go take a look at ATT&CK. If you have ideas, our industry gets better as we work together. And if you have ideas, if you have cool, deceptive or active defense strategies that aren't included in Shield, reach out to the folks at MITRE. As they've said here, they want that stuff. This is, it says directly on the Shield website that this is not a completed project. This is the work in progress. And I think it probably always will stay a work in progress, because as technologies change, as attacker strategies change, and as our capabilities change, we're always going to be adding new things. But ultimately, this this type of conversation and these types of tools are ultimately how we get people, how we improve our security. And as the title of my YouTube channel goes, how we can take back the. So thank you guys so much. It's been awesome.